You are listening to Girls, Ghosts, Ghouls, a podcast where three women discuss horror movies from the silent era through the 1970s. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and Spotify, and Anchor. Timely, topical, terrifying. Well, hello and welcome to another episode of Girls, Ghosts, Ghouls. We wanted to do a nice Thanksgiving episode with a Vincent Price movie that we thought would be great because Vincent Price is a foodie or was a foodie, and he wrote several cookbooks, and we were going to do a tie-in with that. So first we looked to see if he'd put anything out in November, the release date, and we found that the only things released in November were like Dr. Phibius and the girl, bombs and stuff, which is not a horror film. So we were like, no. But then we came across this movie, Scream and Scream Again. Just trigger warning if you go watch it. There are rape scenes and violence against women and other things that could be triggering. So please keep that in mind if you're going to watch it. And we were like, great, because it's billed. The top billing is Vincent Price, Peter Cushing, and Christopher Lee. So we're like, yes, this is wonderful. We'll do Scream and Scream Again. We have never seen it. And here's.
Okay. Do you want me to go now?
I was just going to do the summary, but if you want to.
Yeah. I was just commenting on the cast, and I would like to apologize to both of you again. My words were, it's got Christopher Lee, Peter Cushing, and Vincent Price. How can it be bad? I'm sorry. I was wrong.
I was with you. We were all with you. So here's the summary. Heading British intelligence, Fremont, Christopher Lee carries a heavy workload, what with killers, mad scientists, and all. While a serial killer with a penchant for drinking his victim's blood runs rampant, the murderous and deranged Dr. Browning, played by Vincent Price, engages in harvesting body parts to conduct his experiments. The lead man on the case, Detective Belliver, Alfred Marks, tries to piece it all together while a fascist leader, Peter Cushing, pulls strings from behind the scenes. So this movie sounds wonderful, and this is not wrong, but it's a lie.
But it's completely wrong. It's a big fat lie. Don't you believe it for a second?
Peter Cushing, who's supposed to be having the character that pulls the strings as the fascist leader, just to ruin it for you all, he's in for about a minute and a half in this movie, and then he gets killed. So, and it's revealed that he's not pulling the strings behind all of this. The person who kills him is.
Yes. With the Vulcan shoulder pinch killing.
Yes. Yeah.
Did he kill him with a Vulcan neck?
It makes no sense.
That's what I thought the second I saw it. He goes into, grabs their shoulder, and you're like, okay, he's grabbing their shoulder. Bleed out their ear.
So yes. Yeah, they bleed out their ears. They die tragically from being pinched, and being pinched like here, like not even close to the neck. It's like literally the shoulder. They don't even get it.
It's like mid collarbone.
Yeah, it's
weird.
But yeah, this movie is so bad that we all came across the same trivia where Vincent Price, basically in an interview several years after this movie was made, said he never understood the script at all, which. Who could? Because even though the summary ties these three pieces in very well, the movie does not.
No, the film doesn't. It's my impression is they just threw a collection of scenes at it and kept throwing scenes at it, and then eventually they tied it together in the last 10 minutes.
Pretty much.
And badly. So yeah.
And mostly in exposition, because there was no through line.
You're right. No.
You had to tell us how it was all related. Literally, Vincent Price is like, here's what I'm doing, and here's who this guy is, and this is why this happened, and this is who that guy is. And you're like, I mean, now I kind of get it, but also this is awful. And I can't believe Vincent Price just had to sit here and tell us what the plot of this film is.
I mean, it's so bizarre. Even your fascist regime, they have a Nazi-esque communist vibe. So it looks like it was supposed to reflect East Berlin.
That was my impression.
If you're young, at one point there was the Iron Curtain, and it fell in half Germany, and you had East Berlin and West Berlin. East Berlin belonged to
former USSR, and it was communist, but fascist communism, and not like happy little Marxist communism.
Yeah.
But their symbol was bizarre. We kept laughing about this, Betsy and her husband and I. It was a trident that
It was
looks
basically a trident.
Nordic. So it's like they tried to do a stylization of a trident to resemble Norse runes, is kind of what it looked like, to
Vaguely.
kind of give you that Nazi vibe.
We
But
kept
they
calling
never
them Nefta-Nazis.
Yeah. I mean, the red
Or-
armbands with the black and white symbol on it is enough
Yeah.
to give you at this point a symbol. So
But they never tell you where the hell this fascist country regime exists.
no,
Is it in the movie? I mean, like, there's no, you have the, like, it's just when you watch it, I'm like, is it like Scotland?
It's vaguely Eastern European sounding. All of their accents are vaguely Eastern European, but I'm talking
Or vaguely Germanic.
Vaguely.
very vaguely.
It's
When they show pictures of it, it looks like Northern England. Or so, like, when they're showing, you're like, I don't know what this is.
You just kind of assign it random fascist Eastern European country, territory, what have you.
Something, yeah, that
Yeah.
has somehow has a strong base in England, because they were there and easily able to contact Christopher Lee, who was supposed to be military intelligence in England.
Yeah.
So I don't.
Because they specifically mention a Trafalgar
Trafalgar,
something or
mhm.
other, and that's definitely England. That's
Yeah.
not Berlin. Yeah.
It's very strange. So you have this plot with this fascist state that exists somewhere in the world, of this story, and the plot of it is really vague. Like, you don't really, there's no understanding of it. You just know that it's there, and they're torturing people for most of the movie. Like,
Yeah.
there's-
And you're kind of vague, like the bad guy from the Germans, fascists, whatever they are.
and there's a coup happening in the middle of it too. So,
Yeah, it's like, so he's talking about it. This is becoming a problem. Blah 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 blah. But you don't know what the problem is and what is actions he's referring to that are creating a ruckus.
I think it was supposed to be the evil guys torturing of people being excessive, but they also could be referring to what later on ends up being the building of the super being.
Yeah. See, yes, exactly. It's very unclear and vague.
Meanwhile, in England, though, you have a body show up, which, you know, that apparently was strangled, raped, and the throat was cut, I believe, is like the entirety of it that they first reveal.
And
Sorry, it's not funny. It's just like the way it happens and the way they talk about it. Yes,
Oh,
that
yeah.
later is determined that there's 2 puncture wounds of some sort on the wrist, but they don't determine there's blood loss. They assume at this point in time that the blood has drained into the ground outside because she was murdered outside on the grass. So they don't really think about the draining, the lack of blood at this point for this first murder. So
for the
they
first
just,
murder.
yeah, the first murder. You know, but this then leads us to Vincent Price's Mad Doctor, because the victim was his employee. Like, so that's like the only tie-in you initially get. And like,
Yes.
if you blink, you'll miss it.
Absolutely.
And like, here's where it gets even weirder. The start of the movie will confuse the shit out of you, because all you see is a jogger that passes out.
yeah, it's flashing in between the scenes of that and the, yeah, and then you'll see him in the bed.
Getting that slowly amputated of various extremities.
Yeah, they're
which,
harvesting him for his body, for his legs and arms, and
probably other
and they
things.
make you
just
drink
to-
some brown fluid that may or may not be blood.
yeah, I have no idea what the little thing she's sticking in her mouth is.
So that's
like
the
the
piece
thing
you
that the
have.
dentist sucks out the stuff
I
in
know,
her
it
mouth,
looked
but
like
it was
it's-
putting things in her mouth. I don't understand. And the nurse never says a damn word. She just
No.
looks real fierce and sticks shit in his mouth.
And you don't even know that's connected to Vincent Price's Dr. Browning until, I don't know, like almost the end of the fucking movie.
You have no idea. At
You
that
just
point.
have this thing that's happening where you see this. Like, if this conversation sounds confusing, that's the movie. It's not.
Yeah, we're not trying to jump all over from place to place. I mean, we do it naturally anyway. However, that's the way the movie is. It's a collection of random scenes until Vincent Price extemporizes and tells you what the fuck is going on.
Not until then, yeah.
Yeah,
1970s Ken is snooping around his house.
I was gonna say, when Ken doll comes back, he totally looks like a 1960s Ken doll.
He does. It's the haircut. It's the hair. It's
the hair.
The whole very like helmet-like.
I was like, all right, Ken, what are you doing now? And she's like, that's not his name. I was like, oh, it is. His name is Ken.
Yeah.
But meanwhile, you have the wonderful detective who actually is Betsy's favorite character and also my favorite character, to be honest.
He's my favorite character in the whole thing. He was the only person that was acting well. I don't think he knew what was happening, but at least he seemed more aware of the movie he was in, at least. Like, he's like, I am playing a detective. I need to be detective-like. And he was very detective-like. And I was like, yes, the detective is detective-like. I love this. And he barked orders, and he was hilarious because he would say things like, but he yelled, blah, 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 blah. And then he'd like scurry off, and you're like, okay, I dig this dude. I don't care about anybody else. This guy, this is my favorite guy.
The actor was Alfred Marks, and just to jump on that, like my favorite line that comes out of his mouth just randomly, like they just put him in these weird situations. He's walking through the precinct office, and there's like a really like supposed to be stoned hippie dude like, walking by, and he says something like says "I love you, man" to like the detective, and the detective goes, "I'm mad about you and all too, sir."
I agree. That was a very good line.
And I also like when he starts to eat the sandwich that's obviously been sitting in the precinct like all day, and he's like,
"It looks like ham."
Those like
it looks like ham.
Cheese, or no, yeah, smells like cheese, looks like ham, chicken or something.
Looks like chicken.
Another part of the line to that. I can't remember it. Yeah.
He was just the best part to me.
His timing too, like something really just bizarre will fucking happen. He'll be like, right then, and just
yeah, and he's just kind of unflappable through the whole thing. Yeah, weirdness. He's just like, okay, this is going on, and I'm just gonna do my job.
And to be fair, though, he was the other. So go ahead, Betsy.
I was gonna say, I believe he was a comedian, and I think part of this is that he had really good comedic timing, and so he played the character straight, but with this really good comedic timing. He wasn't trying to be like the funny man, but he was, because he had better timing than everybody else. He would just snap in with something, and you're like, yeah, no, that totally makes sense.
Didn't you say he was also like an auctioneer at one point too, which you can
he was an auctioneer.
Yeah. But so also to be fair to the other actors, so the reason why not to take away from Alfred Marks in general, but the reason why he's seen consistently in place is because at least his storyline in and of itself was consistent. The most of it was literally investigating these murders. So he had a consistent plot until actually he had a consistent plot period. And then
I would say he's like, okay, I am acting in a police procedural, which has nothing to do with the rest of the film.
Because honestly, all of that particular line, the girl being murdered, the police, all made quite a bit of sense. When you got back to that, you were like, oh, this is refreshing. I know what's happening here. There's a murderer, and they're trying to solve the murder. Until the very end, when it gets batshit bananas, and they're like, they take the hand back to not the lab, but instead to somebody's back garden.
So there's a second murder, obviously. Now, it's not clear to me. They make it sound like there's more than two murders, because it seems like they go into having a sting and elaborate plot really quick. So but they only highlight two murders. So I don't know if there was more happening in the background and I don't know. But there's two murders that are in the movie that are tied together. And the second one that they find really bizarre is this time the woman who is raped and strangled and has her throat cut with the 2 puncture wounds in her wrist is on a concrete surface that this happens, and there's no blood anywhere. So now they realize there's a blood drainage issue.
The detective is even like, so this happened and this happened and a throat got cut. Yeah. Well,
Where's
where'd the blood go? So I'm like, hey, points. You put two and two together.
Yep. So, which is funny because the murder that they actually said, like, they don't actually in the movie hide from you, the viewer, who the murderer is, because they show you him doing the second murder. And let me tell you, it shouldn't be funny, but this whole fucking scene is just parts of it is shitty. Like part of it, watching this woman get thrown around and beat is terrible to see. It's not funny at all. But like leading up to it, you have this horrible club scene where you have the you have the theme song for the movie being played in the club. You have the weird pickup, like to us, this would not work. Like he's like, let's go for a drive. Sure, man, I never met. Let's just jump in your car. And then you get this nice weird scene where she's fondling the stick shift in a suggestive manner and he grabs her thigh and then they pull over and he starts going at her and she's like, no, not here.
Not here.
And then it's when it gets dark.
Yes.
But there's also weird things. So he's, she ends up running away. He chases her. It gets nasty. But as he's pushing her around, suddenly her face starts getting weirdly like melty. Like we still haven't figured this part out. It looks like skin has been like acidically burned off. We have no explanation for this. It's never.
I don't know what the makeup person
skin acid. We don't know.
Was the idea that he like scraped her face along the wall, because it didn't look like that. It looked like acid.
It was just weird. But at any rate, they introduce you in the car to him. This is Keith, the vampire. Which in and of itself is hilarious.
Make myself a hello. My name is Keith the vampire.
Yeah.
It's just Keith the vampire. That's the vampire. And there's a whole scene where like somebody's trying to guess his name, and he's like, "Oh, that's too ordinary," or something like that. And I'm like,
she's like,
"But
Peter,
your name's Keith."
And he's like, "That's too ordinary." And she's like, "Michael?" And I was like, "That's less ordinary than Peter." Girl, who the hell are you? You went with the Major Saints.
It turns out it's Keith anyways.
Not even a biblical name. It's Keith.
Yeah.
So our brilliant detective, they decide to do a sting, right? And they find a female officer and they dress her up and wire. And there's this whole like just horrible scene where they're putting the wire on her, where her boyfriend or fiance is there in the background. And of course, as they put the wire on, they have to like go up her skirt and all this stuff. And he's getting offended. And she's just like here. And then, ironically, they go to the same club. She manages to lure Keith the vampire. Like, meanwhile, they don't know who the killer is. So she's just lucky. And Keith the vampire is like, yes, that is my next victim. And so she drives off with him. And this is another scene that's like funny, not funny. Because the cops are following, right? They're supposed to be protecting her. And he pulls off the road and you hear like these sounds that don't sound like something she'd want to be involved in. And like two of the cops are like, "Oh, let her have some fun." And her fiance is like, "Let's start it now." And then they hear a weird scraping noise. I don't know if how would you ladies describe it? The noise that they find questionable.
That's as close as any approximation. Oh.
Yeah, like it's a weird noise. I think it's supposed to be him sucking, which is gross, but it sounds like something like scraping. Like
clothing scraping against something, or it's just weird. So then they run to the rescue. Of course, he's already choked out. The cop is sucking her blood through her wrist.
Yeah.
And the vampire is now punch drunk off her blood. And the whole vampire scene is fucking hilarious, guys. I mean, like, I highly recommend you don't watch this movie, but if you do, here's a scene that you could just get a huge laugh out. But it goes on forever.
It's like
the longest chase.
Yeah. It's like in Casino Royale at the beginning when Daniel Craig is chasing a bad guy and it just keeps going and going. And you're like, what? Isn't it? No, it's not in it. No, it's not in it. And eventually the vampire runs and he dives into a vat of acid.
Yeah, but before we get there, there's a whole scene where they corner him at the quarry and he's like runs straight up this almost like straight vertical cliff and then suddenly slips and rolls down. And they're like, "Oh, he's dead." He's not dead. So they handcuff him to the bumper of a car.
That's right. I forgot about that one.
He like tears off his arm, like basically forearm up, and runs again. And then he runs to what ends up being Vincent Price's house, Dr. Browning's house, to the stables there, where he apparently knows that there is a pit of acid, and he jumps into the pit of acid. And what gets even funnier, as Rebecca noted, is like they can see it's this gross bubbling yellow liquid that he jumped into, and the other cops are like, "Hey, uniform cop, why don't you go reach in there and see if you can
get the beat cop to do it? I'm not touching it."
Like the worst acting in the movie now comes up, in my opinion, because he sticks his hand and he's like, "Oh yeah, it's supposed to hurt. Ow, oh." It was like Pee Wee Herman's death scene in Buffy the Vampire Slayer, the movie.
Ow, 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 ow. Oh no, my hand. It is so burnt up by the acid.
Oh, yeah. You're just like, come on. No, let's no, that's bad.
Which is like the worst. So they actually then go in to interview Dr. Browning and like, "Hey, so like, why do you have a pit of acid in your stable?" And he's like, "Oh, because I work with dangerous bacteria and you have to dispose of it sometimes because you don't want to get it out of the environment. But I guess it's kind of dangerous out there in the stable." And they're like, how did Keith the vampire know that the acid was in his?" And like, there's Vincent Price, like, "Oh, well, since his first victim was the nurse that worked here, she probably told him."
Which I did think, I was like, oh, that's a good segue to
really good excuse.
Why do you have two separate incidences pointing at you?
I mean, it was quick on your feet response, and it was like not unreasonable, but also was like, she's a murder rape victim though, and his guy's MO so far doesn't look like he befriends them first, but okay. It's better than no explanation, right? Like,
yeah,
it does provide a connection, but yeah, like, and I think they are curious about it too, because that detective initially doesn't plan on closing the case at this point.
Yeah, no,
but
he gets a call from Christopher Lee.
Well,
remember
also
what he said, back to that other plot.
Yeah. So Christopher Lee, who showed up briefly in a scene prior to all of this, where he's clearly some kind of English intelligence officer, and they were having a discussion that's so boring that basically all you catch is that they have spy planes that they want to fly over the weird fascist state, that are safe because if they crash or get shot down, they self-destruct and the pilot and everybody involved dies, is the scene. And then it turns out that the self-destruct didn't work, but we'll get to that later on. But so you just know this, and so what happened
literally feels like it has nothing to do with anything else.
It doesn't, but that's how they like pull it all in to because evil, crazy torture fascist guy is like, "We have your pilot, and if you want him back or you want me to dispose him or whatever, or make this go away, then you need to make this case go away."
The guy we called Count Von Count because he looked like the Count from Sesame Street. That guy, yeah.
That's like the whole reason for that scene in the plane, is for the Count Von Count to go to Christopher Lee in Trafalgar Square and go, "Hey, I'll make this whole thing, this incident where your pilot and plane crashed in our territory, go away if you keep the vampire case go away completely." Which is now why you know that somehow the fascist government is tied in to keep the vampire. And you realize there must be some strange connection with Dr. Browning because pit of acid.
You're like,
But at this point, you're like, meanwhile, you have this hand that is not in the morgue, because they do have a morgue, but is in, I don't know, a little conservatory area around somewhere that they just left on a table.
No.
That they determined that the hand is not quite human flesh.
It was the doctor's home, I think. Like the original morgue doctor's home. Why are you taking evidence home, Mr. Doctor?
There's some kind of work you can take home, and then there's other work that really needs to stay in the lab. This should stay in the lab.
Like a person's hand
there. So this home had a random nurse there at night that got killed when the synthetic nurse came.
Yeah, composite. Composite, I think was the word.
Composite, yes, that's what they called them, composites. Thank you, Rebecca.
Franken nurse.
So bad. It's awful.
It actually.
People, I know you think that we're lying. This is really this film. We cannot make this shit up.
So
Think
yeah,
all the other movies that we've watched, that we've been like, well, it's a little rough, but there are some redeeming factors. No, there is not, that I can find, a redeeming factor in this movie that makes it worth watching.
Yeah,
it's
no.
So
even though I
meanwhile,
love the detective, don't watch it for him. Don't.
just
No.
don't watch it. Really, just take us at our word. The detective's funny. Really weird chase scene that's way too long, but has some interesting payouts here and there. And you do have Vincent Price, Christopher Lee, and Peter Cushing, but Peter Cushing for like 3 minutes, Christopher Lee for 5, Vincent Price for maybe 10.
Yeah. He has the biggest out of all
Lovely,
three of them.
awkward eye contact scene between Vincent Price and Christopher Lee.
Oh man, that's probably my favorite, weirdly favorite part. I just want to isolate that, and it needs to be a meme because it's just like,
And the closer looks at Christopher Lee's eyes, and the camera gets in, he's staring as only Christopher Lee can.
And Vincent Price cowering as only he can. If you see any of the Poe movies that he's in where he gets weird and just it's you can see it in other movies, so you don't have to watch this movie to see that look from Vincent Price, nor do you have to watch this movie to see the lovely stare from Christopher Lee. You can see it in Dracula, 1979, I think it is.
Yeah.
The Horror of Dracula, I think is what he plays.
One of the Hammer films.
Yeah.
So
Go find
you
one of
can
those.
spare yourself this.
He will look at you, and that's fine. But you don't have to watch this. Don't watch this.
No,
Please
no,
don't watch this.
please.
You get the tie-in, so you don't have to watch this, because 1960s Ken, who was actually the mortician's or the ME's medical examiner's assistant, is mad that they're closing the case because, again, Christopher Lee has contacted a detective and said, "Hey, you got to close it down, and Ken
State secrets, stop
Kendall
investigating.
said no, and he takes, I think, the female cop who was used in the sting operation, but I'm not entirely sure.
I'm not sure either. Or well, yeah, that's right. He takes her there, or whoever, the dark
Yeah, I
haired
think
female
it's
cop.
the same woman, but it's
I'm honestly not sure if it is or just all lady cops in England at this time looked identical. Because I think they think she was in she was surviving, but she was going to be in the hospital for a while. If I remember correctly, they say that at one point when they're over the state radio.
But I don't know if you're talking about her or the other cop that got punched. Because they seem like they're just kind of ignoring her. Fuck that girl. Who knows? But I'm not watching it again to figure it out. So people, pick your favorite theory and go with it. But let's talk about Ken Doll being really fucking call a real cop to her, ignoring the fact that she's a police officer. So he takes her to go investigate Dr. Browning's place because he thinks it's rather weird too that there was a pit of acid. And so far, at least 2 people have tied back here: Keith the vampire and the first victim, right? The jogger, by the way, after he's removed of all his extremities, is no longer in the story. So there you go. And the only reason you know that it has to do with Dr. Browning is because eventually you see that nurse working with him.
Don't you also see the jogger's head when the coroner assistant is opening the little fridges?
When Ken Doll, yeah, but that's this scene now. Prior to that, you have no idea.
Yeah, you lose him entirely.
Prior to that, the nurse is the only tie.
Yeah.
But yeah, so Ken Doll goes in to start exploring the area, and he finds, well, first of all, the lady cop hits the horn to try to warn him that something's going on. Oh, he looks for the acid pit. It is the trap door is there, the well's there, no acid is there in the stable anymore. The horn gets hit so that the lady cop is signaling something's wrong. When he runs back out to see what happens, her and the car are gone. He calls the cops, the office, obviously, to get back up, where he's informed that our favorite detective has been murdered. And then hung up on.
And they're like, we've got more important things. Click.
Which, by the way, he was murdered by Count von who came in to collect the evidence from the case that was being closed because Christopher Lee gave him access. And then when the detective refused to turn over the evidence, he just killed him and took it again with the shoulder pinch. Can't even call it a neck pinch.
Fascist
And
shoulder pinch.
yeah, the fascist, the Nazi trident.
You're right.
But yeah, so Ken Doll goes back in the house and is exploring around and finds like various limbs and body parts and heads and stuff in the house stored away in like a freezer area, like a
I was
morgue
gonna
would
say,
have.
like in morgue drawers, kind of.
Yeah.
What it
And
looked like to me.
Dr. Browning / Vincent Price catches him in the act and is like, "You're a doctor, though. Do you want to know? Just know that if you know, you can't go back." And of course, Ken's trying to buy some time. So he's like, "Yeah, I want to know."
Sure.
Which is when we get introduced to composites and things get really confusing because they're harvesting limbs, but apparently they have something called a fabricator that makes the limbs out of fake stuff. So I'm not sure exactly how that works out.
I think what it was, because originally when they were examining the hand, they're like, well, it's not all human, because some parts were natural and some parts were synthetic. So what my theory is that they're using the human parts, real parts. They're using some of them as a matrix for the rest of the composite.
Okay.
That
That makes more sense than anything else. I like it. Also, Rebecca's a scientist, so there you go.
Not a mad one currently.
As far as we know. Not on official recorded video.
Let's not talk about my basement
at all. Meanwhile, so it gets revealed during the scene that he's making superior beings that he's calling composites, and that he's so advanced it's like where people are, and also keep in mind this is like 1969 1970, so organ transplants are not actually common at all. They're known, they're tried, success levels are pretty low actually, I believe, in this reality at this time. So Vincent Price is like, we're so far advanced, you're just starting to hit where we are and all this stuff. And basically he has, I don't know, a composite body of a woman that needs a brain is kind of what I got from it. So they had the female cop that I guess they were gonna cut open her head and stick the brain. I don't, that was my guess. I don't know.
Yeah, he was trying a brain transfer for whatever reason. That's kind of how I just summed it up.
Yeah, and it still doesn't explain why Keith was trying to drink blood or what the brown liquid was they're sending in people's mouths that they were amputating parts from.
Yeah.
Not known. But meanwhile, Kendall tries to stab the nurse, the composite nurse who's, been involved from the start, that we never really understood until now why she had any involvement in the movie. And it just upsets Vincent Price because it's like pointless because you can't hurt her. So what he was doing was just mean, basically.
Well,
Dr. Really Sorry, go ahead.
I said it was pretty funny because he's like, stop that. That's unnecessary. He's like a dad scolding a child, like, stop.
It was.
Just picking on your sister. Stop it.
Yep.
And somehow around this point, Count Von Count comes in because he wants to destroy everything, which also becomes another confusing conversation. So, but during this point, Kendall rescues cop lady, and they pretty much get mostly out of the picture for a little bit while Count Von Count and Vincent Price are having a discussion about what's going on now and like how, and this is how you know that this was part of the Nazi, whatever, fascist.
And we're like, thank you for explaining why this is here.
That's tying in the whole three plots that don't, and not very well. So we're still like, okay, sure. Oh, and by the way, somehow Vincent Price himself was a composite, but we have no idea how
they didn't
he became
that much.
Like who created him? Don't know.
Did he do it to himself?
Parts on himself. Unknown. But Vincent Price is very mad at Count Von Count because he's like, you're just going to abuse this knowledge. I won't allow you to do it. And Count Von Count's like, we got to destroy this because you drew too much attention. So I have no idea what is actually happening in this scene other than they're fighting. And you find out well, you might have found out early, but the acid pool was moved into the lab to make it safer. And he dumps Count Von Count after a bit of a battle into the acid vat, and that's the end of the fascist neck pinch.
I got nothing, man.
Enter Christopher Lee again, who apparently knew all along that Dr. Browning's place was here and that the fascists were making superior. I don't know. And he comes in and to clean up the mess and has, I don't even know that it's really a conversation at all with Vincent Price's character, but basically stares them down so that Vincent Price's character puts himself in the acid bath.
Evil mind control. I don't know.
Yeah, so that's Scream and Scream Again, and we're all hurt by the experience.
Yeah, we fell on the sword so that you don't have to. As you may have picked up from us the whole time, do not watch this movie. Don't hurt yourself like that. You don't deserve it.
Honestly, I think my husband was slightly mad at me that I made him watch this one. I mean, usually he's a good sport about this, but he was like, like, I know, babe, I know. He's like, I don't know. I was like, I know. I know.
I
would just like to point out I sat through it twice.
I was gonna say, and we went over and watched it with Jenny.
Jenny, after we're done here, do you need me to take you to Studio 35 and get you a drink?
I think somebody needs to. I need a cookie or some shit. But I think this kind of sums it up, and this is a little sad. So when filming the acid bath death scene, Vincent Price's nose was badly affected by the chemicals used, and he had problems with nasal sinuses for many years afterwards. And I feel like we're gonna have problems with the after effects of that. So we feel you, Vincent Price, because it hurt us too.
I'm gonna be honest, like there was the one club scene, this dude walked by, and I was like, do you know what? I want to follow that guy because he looks really interesting. And I just want to know what's going on with him. Can we just go with that guy who is not relevant to the plot at all, but is way more interesting than anyone else I've seen in this film? So
the only redeeming part was like, in like the club scene, you see like a couple outfits that are like, oh, that's kind of cool. Because I love vintage stuff. And you're like, oh, that's neat. Yeah.
Yeah.
There were cars. There was a Jaguar in there, and
I was
gonna
say
really nice cars.
The police car was a Jaguar, which is awesome. And that's how I found out that modern police cars in Great Britain are BMWs. So,
and Keith the Vampire had an Austin Healey convertible.
Yeah, I liked that. I liked his car.
That was beautiful. That was beautiful.
So I mean, but again, don't watch this movie.
Don't
just
watch
Google, Austin Healey's from like 1955 and Jaguars from like 1960. I think it was, maybe it was older than that. Hold on.
Yeah, go.
Yeah, it was a 1965 Jaguar. So there you go.
Yeah. Don't.
Yeah, we do not recommend this. We are warning you against it, and this is, I think, the only time in all our episodes that we've done this.
Absolutely. We've watched some stinker films and been like, no, it's still a really good time and it's a romp. This is not a romp. This is weird and disjointed, and it truly, the explanation that Jenny gave up front would be the only way that you would know what the plot of this film was. Although I would be remiss if I didn't say that there was a scene where a man got shot wearing lederhosen, very, very short lederhosen.
Yes, that was part of the fascist
Nazis, like the fascists shot him down in lederhosen, and that made me laugh harder than pretty much anything in the world has ever made me laugh, because a man died in incredibly short lederhosen.
His shorts were shorter than his tan line on his legs. It was like, I'm surprised his junk stayed. Also, the jogger shorts were very disturbing at the beginning as well.
And they kept focusing real hard on it, and I was like, I need not to look at his Johnson. Thank you so much. I need you not to show me this.
I have no desire to know about this guy's genitalia. Thanks.
Just bounce
Put it away.
Folks, this is so bad. So for another podcast I'm on, I had to watch Thanksgiving 3, and I would rather do that than watch. And And that's saying a lot.
Yeah,
I've seen screenshots from it.
We found a Vincent Price movie that we will not watch ever again.
And
I feel like that
honestly,
should be written down somewhere.
But we might
Vincent
inflict on other
Price-
people.
Maybe.
Vincent Price isn't bad in this film. We're not saying
No.
Vincent Price is bad. He's fine. He's
Yeah.
doing his Vincent Pricey best to add whipped cream to basically a shit dessert. Like it was made of food, and he put whipped cream on it.
Does fine as well. Peter Cushing in the whole 3 seconds he's there does fine. Alfred Marks, I believe it was the name was who does detective, fine. The movie
detective.
is shit. There's no saving it.
They can only do so much with the script that they're given, and bless them, they tried.
They really tried, but what
I hope they got
mostly
paid a lot.
I
hope
hope.
so.
I hope so.
I doubt it, but I hope they did.
I know.
Because it
This
was
is being hurt.
just a bad film. Although I did find myself, this is what happens when I'm watching a really bad film. I find myself going back and fantasy casting if they were to make this film today.
Let's hear it.
So the big one was Keith the Vampire. I was like, ooh, Jamie, damn name, Jamie Campbell Bower played Vecna on Stranger Things this last season and was the orderly. I was like, he would be Keith because he's got the same cheek. I can't remember some of the other ones that I was saying, but yeah, I was trying to like, oh, if we made this now, we wouldn't because it's awful.
Christopher Lee's character.
That would be good. That would be good. Yeah. I'm trying to think.
Daniel Craig is the detective.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think he could even do that accent. He had a real like East London accent. Like his accent wasn't like posh. He talked more straight.
Yeah.
And I think Daniel Craig could do that.
As one of you guys pointed out when we were talking earlier, so the original story featured aliens as the villains, but they were replaced by communists in the movie version. But aliens might have made more sense. I don't know. I don't know.
Aliens would have improved it somehow.
Honestly.
Yeah.
Just there's so much of this that just literally doesn't make sense.
It's like they randomly generated the script. It's like if an AI wrote a movie.
Maybe it was actually the team of monkeys, and they just took 3 of the best that the monkeys with the typewriters could come up with, and then they were like, "Let's just leash these 3 stories."
It literally is like they gave an AI the works of Edgar Allan Poe and said, "Set this in the modern era, go," and that's what they came up with.
Yeah.
Like this doesn't make any
AI would have done
sense.
better.
Not very good. I don't.
Yeah.
I
guess a more better description would be like, it's as if they handed a movie to Elon Musk and let him do what he wanted with it. I'm just
not wrong. Yeah. Oh, it is a stinker of a film. I didn't even see. Does it have a rating like on Rotten Tomatoes?
I didn't look.
I'm gonna look. Hold on a second, because I want to see. Like, it has to be like 0.
You would think that, but some shit on Rotten Tomatoes makes no fucking sense. Like you wonder, it's like when they do like the best of, you could just tell that 3 people voted, and these 3 people never had the real good stuff to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah,
5.5 out of 10.
Way too high.
Yeah.
This should be like a 1, maybe a 2 if you're being super generous and you're just going on the cast.
I'll give it a 1 for the cast.
Okay, the whole budget for this film was $350,000.
That seems excessive for what we got.
I agree.
I was thinking 15,000 maybe.
I guess most of it went to the salary for the big 3.
Probably.
I hope. Apparently it was distributed in 1971 on a double bill with the other movie being The Incredible Two-Headed Transplant, which probably is a better movie than this.
Now I have to look that other movie up.
The Incredible Two-Headed Transplant.
I mean, I don't know if MST3K spoofed this movie or not, but they should have if they didn't.
Or maybe Joe Bob Briggs can like roast it. I got nothing.
Yeah, it would be ripe for tearing apart because there's so much material to work with.
Yeah, go ahead, Betsy. You look like you looked something up.
I'm on IMDb and somebody gave this 8 stars.
What?
That's all you need to know about people who start things.
Yeah. Goes to show you, don't trust the internet.
He says it's incomprehensible. Why'd you give it 8 stars?
Like, you won't even understand this movie. 8 stars. What the fuck is wrong with you?
Doing. All right.
And, okay,
I quit. I have no faith in people.
No. Don't look, Betsy.
That's how Trump got elected president. There you go.
The lesser of two evils. Oh.
Okay. Any final thoughts?
If we haven't said it already, don't watch this.
Don't.
I want that time of my life back. Thank God the runtime was only like 1 hour 35 minutes. As it was, I was like, okay, I'm gonna pause this and go do my laundry. Okay, maybe it'll be better when I come back. And then I come back and I play. Now
it's not better when you come back.
I'm gonna make myself some coffee. Come back. I finally finished it, and I'm like, this. Oof.
I've got to tell you guys, I stopped drinking caffeine on the 1st of November because I was very, very addicted, and I was like, I need to cleanse this from my system.
Maybe do a bit of a detox.
I need to do a bit of a detox. Yeah. So I gave up caffeine. This was a bad month to give up caffeine because this was a bad movie to not have caffeine.
I agree.
Watching it sober is a mistake too. I mean,
yeah.
Don't watch it, but if you do, don't be sober.
Be drunk.
Maybe like get some very good edibles beforehand. I don't know. I really don't know what would make this movie better other than totally rewriting it.
I mean, we had a good time. The best way to watch this, if you are going to do it and don't, the best way to watch it is have a whole bunch of people be there, or at least a couple people be there, and then just MST3K that thing the whole way through. Just
agreed.
Make it funny, because watching it as a serious film is a no. Like I said, we watched it. I went to Jenny's, so Jenny, me, my husband, we're all sitting there and we're all making comments on everything that's happening. So that made it at least semi-palatable because we were laughing a lot. But yeah, you cannot. I am glad I did not watch this by myself, because I would have been like,
yeah.
To be fair, so I watched it first
from renting it.
So I paid $10 just to own the movie because I was like, okay, before I watched it, because I'm like, it's $10. It's got Peter Cushing, Christopher Lee, and Vincent Price. I mean, $10 is nothing for these three, right? I'm mad about it a little, to tell you the truth, but at least I got some of my money's worth out of it. Because so I watched it alone first. I warned Betsy and Rebecca. I was like, oh my God, horrible. I'm so sorry.
And I made sure to pay extra attention to it because you had warned me that it was very disjointed. I'm like, okay, well, let me make sure I pay attention so I know what's going on. That didn't help. I paid very close attention and I'm still like, what is this? What the fuck is that? What are they doing with this guy? You know, and it.
Oh, like honestly, the whole jogger thing, if you blink at the wrong moment, you don't understand the guy being amputated in the hospital bed is the jogger guy.
Yeah.
So if you like blinked when they did his flashback, you'd be like, why is it? What the fuck did the jogger? The jogger still didn't have much to do with the damn thing, but at least you.
Yeah, I mean, and I'm usually really good at following a movie just by context. This one had none.
There was no context.
No, it was all random shit.
I'm telling you, literally, if they hadn't told us the plot at the end, I still wouldn't know how this was all connected. Not really. I'd be like, I'm guessing this is what happened, but I don't know at this point. And who knows why he was a vampire? We still don't know why he was a vampire. No one knows why he was a vampire. He was just a closet, but we still don't know why he craved blood.
Yeah.
Or why he self-destructed even, but okay.
I don't know. It was oh man.
I mean, Yeah.
So with that, don't watch this movie.
Don't watch it.
And thanks for bearing with us. Happy
Truly.
Thanksgiving.
Thank you for
Sticking around.
watching.
Happy Thanksgiving. Watch the Macy's parade. It will be better than this.
Don't watch this movie.
Don't watch this movie. If you feel a weird desire to watch this movie, watch something else and like it.
If you feel that, reach out to one of us and we will talk you down from that ledge.
Watch any of the other movies that we have done. Literally all of them are better.
Yes. Every damn one.
Thanks. Good night.
Good night, all.
You have been listening to the Girls Go Schools podcast. You can follow us on Facebook or Instagram at Girls Go Schools podcast, on Twitter at Girls Ghost Pod. Like and subscribe to our YouTube channel, Girls Go Schools podcast, and find our podcast on your favorite podcatcher.